dear friend. He just died last year, Dr. Angelo Galea. He just died at 89. He studied the brain since he was a teenager. And he said the essence of our brain harmony is to come out for live music. That music harmonizes our brains. So it's a gift to us that Maggie organized this and that Holly came all this way to perform for us tonight. So thank you for coming out. Maggie. Well,
thank you, Father Max, for hosting us tonight, and thank you to St. Paul's other staff members who've been so helpful, Joe Hammer and John Howard. I wanted to thank you all for being here, and we're thrilled and honored to have Holly and her accompanist, Jan Martinelli, join us for a night of music and conversation. This evening is dedicated to William G. Porter, M.D., Bill. Bill was my late husband, and you can read a little brief story about him on the back of your program. He didn't like to draw attention to himself, so he probably would prefer to be on the back. Also, I'd like to thank all the people that helped with this effort. There's logos on the back of the program to highlight those helpers, but in particular, in addition to St. Paul's, Nantucket Athenaeum was marvelous in helping arrange for last night's workshop. Lisa Lothian and the other team that puts on the Tuesday arts night at the library every Tuesday night, except tonight when we're here. The Nantucket Community Music School, what a wonderful force of good for the island. Tony Wagner has done the sound for us tonight. We also have other family and friends who wish to remain anonymous, and we're very much appreciated, and I'm so grateful for everyone's help. I want to especially thank Holly and Jan for coming such a long way from California to be here tonight. We are the first stop on a multi-stop tour for them. And now, let's give them a warm Nantucket welcome and hear some music.
This is lovely for me, because I have, get rid of this one, some lyrics. Sorry about that. I grew up in a really small town, and my first 8 years of school were with sort of the 10 and 15 kids all went through all those grades together. Then going to high school, it was a big change. Went to a high school that had 400 people. And I've always felt very connected to, even though my career, which was at perhaps its largest in the 80s, I always felt so warm and tingly when I got to those small communities that reminded me of how impactful the community was for us to grow up in a small town. And that they were so sensitive to the fact that they had a little red-headed girl in the community who had a big voice and who clearly wanted to go on to be a singer. And how do you get to do that when you're in a tiny little town? This is cutting in and out. Can you hear it? Is this my monitor? It's cutting in and out. You want me to pause? You can fix that, or? You're working on it. Okay. The Grange Hall and the Farm Bureau and Mr. Optimus clubs and all of these social service clubs, the Lions Club, would ask me to come and sing at their lunches. And there's no better way to practice than to have opportunity. I've just been so grateful to their willingness. And my mom thought sometimes they were a little insensitive, that they would give me, I don't know, a little tacky bracelet or some chocolates. She said, why don't we just give you $1 so that you can understand that it's very difficult to make a living as a singer. So we wanted me to start knowing from the very beginning that this would work. But that said, being invited to those places and really being able to develop a craft. So it warms my heart to come to communities that This one isn't all that small, but I do understand that a lot is going on here all the time, especially around with Gay Pride and Father's Day and all of the other things that are being celebrated like summer. So we're going to do some songs. I'll tell you some stories about my time on the road. And gosh, this is not working. There it goes. In hopes of us having a celebration of how music can change lives. The first concert that I think I saw in grammar school was a group of young Mexican early teens come up from Mexico to play a tour, I guess, in California as part of the community concerts that were established around the country. And I got to know where Mexico was because of them. And then after that, one of the clubs said, well, we'd like to invite you to come on our theme, and they were moved by it as well. Our theme is south of the border. So I had to look up and say, well, where is south of the border? And learned a song called Vaya con Dios, My Darling. And then the next groups that would come, this has kept going on in my life even up until I ran into some Chilean musicians when I was at an international festival in Northern Europe. And I was just so enamored by their music, but also by what they were going through. They had been on tour when there was a military coup in Chile in 1973 and Pinochet took over. And Pinochet's forces had herded artists, intellectuals, teachers, workers, labor unions into a huge stadium and killed a lot of people. But the first one, they picked out the most beloved artist in Chile. His name was Victor Jara. And they ceremoniously killed him so that everyone could be forewarned. And when I heard that story, it was part of developing this understanding how music can be entertaining, it can be healing, it can be inspiring, it can also be dangerous, not only for the listener but for the artists themselves. And so in advance of danger, it is so important for those of us who have a spiritual program of some sort as well as a social consciousness to be ready, to know who the artists are in our community, who has spoken out and we need to be protected. I think Minneapolis, Minnesota learned some about this recently. And so thank you for being here, and we'll do some songs and stories and share the evening with you. I was asked, well, are you a socialist? Are you a communist? Are you a politician? Are you an actor? Are you a preacher? Are you? And I just didn't know how to find one word for it. And it was from that came this song. I am open and I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It dishonors those who go before us. So lift me up to the light of change. There is a hurting in my family, and there is sorrow in my town. There is a panic all across the nation, and there is wailing so isolated out on this little ranch that they didn't want us, when we finally left home, to be afraid. So their philosophy really was fascination rather than fear. That if something seemed to be jarring, like when we would go, it was a 5-hour drive at that time to get to San Francisco. It's 2 hours now. My mom would put us in the station wagon and go down there so we could see different kinds of people. And if we saw someone in a wheelchair or in a turban and we point, instead of slapping our hand and saying, don't point, she'd go, yeah, isn't that interesting? That person gets in a wheelchair. Or that person may have come from Egypt. Let's look it up in the World Book Encyclopedia when we get home. So there was this curiosity instilled in us. One of the records that my mom, she had a catalog of some sort, she'd order by mail, these records. And my dad had to go down and build a different size mailbox to make sure it would fit the size of a record album. And we had to make sure to get the mail soon after it was delivered because it was so hot. We didn't want them to melt. But one of the records that came in was by a singer named Odetta. And I had never heard a woman's voice like that. And she sang so low. And I was still singing right here. And one of the songs I learned off of her record was called Sail Away. Ain't no use in crying. You'll be an angel by and by. Don't you rock 'em, Daddy, oh, don't you rock 'em, Daddy, oh, don't you rock 'em, don't you rock 'em, Daddy, oh. I got a home in Tennessee, sail away, lady, sail away. That's the place I wanna be, sail away, lady, sail away. Don't you rock 'em, Daddy, oh, don't you rock 'em, Daddy, oh, don't you rock 'em, don't you rock 'em, Daddy, oh. I got a home in New Orleans, sail away, lady, sail away. Now all I got left is my old jeans, sail away, lady, sail away. Don't you rock 'em, Daddy, oh, don't you rock 'em, Daddy, oh, don't you rock 'em, don't you rock 'em, Daddy, oh. So we sail away, ladies, sail away, sail away, ladies, sail away. Now, Daddy, sail away, ladies, sail away, ladies, sail away. I had no idea, as I was growing up, that I would end up meeting Odetta, working with her, meeting Pete Seeger, working with him, working with Ronnie Gilbert, her, of the Weavers, and of course with Guthrie's son, Arlo Guthrie, getting to know Joan Baez and her sister, meeting Farina, and singing at Mimi's funeral. All of these extraordinary players, Janice Ian, Phoebe Snow, that I was able to either sing with or cross paths with. And when you're little, you maybe dream about things, but my dream, I wanted to be a Broadway star. I didn't know I'd be going into folk music. And I listened to all the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals. And My Fair Lady, I think, was the first show I saw in New York on Broadway. My grandmother took me to it. And then when I got home, it turned out that my senior year, the choir director was producing My Fair Lady at our high school. So I got to play Liza Doolittle. And one little fantasy unfolded after another in the most extraordinary way. So when I first went sort of to the southeast, and I became familiar with what was going on with the miners in West Virginia and the struggles that were happening in the Carolinas. I read about an old woman who had tried to stop the strip mining from taking over the land that she and her family had lived on for decades. And she tried all the legal means, and nothing was successful. Take things to court, nothing happened. So finally, big trucks were arriving, the equipment was coming that was going to strip mine the land and remove all of the minerals and just leave the place in despair and disaster. So she stood in front of the trucks and said, "If you're going to take this land, you're going to have to take me first." Well, such an extraordinary act of courage on her part. And I've always been inspired by courage. But they lifted this old woman out of the ankles and the arms and carried her off and threw her in jail. And apparently her children, who lived in the holler one over, came down out of the mountains with hot rifles and liberated her from jail. But that's a different song. But and I just think it's so extraordinary. And then the next generation recently has come along in Tennessee and places like that, organizing to try. The strip mining used to happen, they'd go underground. Now they're just going in from the top, just cutting off the tops of mountains and going in from the top. So this was sort of inspired by that, well, very much inspired by that woman, but my friend John McCutcheon, you know his work, he's a folk artist, and he said that he was talking to a friend who was part of the West Virginia coal mining wars. His name was Nimrod Workman. And apparently it was the first time the United States ever used aerial bombing was against the West Virginia coal miners, against their own people in their own country. I have dreamed on this mountain since first I was my mother's daughter, and you can't just take my dreams away. Not with me watching you may drive a big machine, but I was born a great big woman, and you can't just take my dreams away. Not with very well in their land. So these kind of international exchanges that take place, not on the big scene, one person to another, we start together, you know, we have and I wish that the woman was really good at this kind of one. But the old woman is gone. She is moved on to wherever it is we go or don't go. I want to do a song by Lee Guthrie. He writes about farmer. The one, there's many farmer organizations, but the ones that I was familiar with was in Northern California. You know, the farmers. We would do long marches with them up and down the coast or highway. This 99. I got really sick 2 years ago. It was a 214 cancer. And 2 years ago, I got renal cancer. I thought, oh, I don't talk about things to people, but really, I understand other people and say cancer. It wasn't like elbow cancer. But I decided that's what I've done all my life. Talk about stuff we're not supposed to talk about. So I had to have chemo treatment, radiation, lost all my hair, and lost a lot of energy that I've never gotten back. And I also want to thank Maggie and her family for being so helpful, getting some places like giving me a lot of time to rest because I was used to being very busy and having a vibrant, active life, and I had to rethink, because in the middle of all that, I was on a stroke. So learning to work with a new brain, a new body, and adjust. And I feel now because I think we need to demystify some of these things, and maybe there's someone in your family that has anal cancer and they're embarrassed to talk about it. I got a wonderful email from a man in the audience, and he said, the other day I was in the grocery store, and we were waiting in line for a big order that was being rung up, and I turned to the person behind me and said, have you ever said the word anal cancer? And he gave a whole conversation with a total stranger about it. And I love the possibilities when we're over. And it comes back to that telling you about our parents, that we would have due fascination or fear. I'm better, but I'll never be the person I was before it. And things drop away sound today. was, because that was somebody I grew up listening to her music a lot, and I wanted to go pay my respects, and they said, oh, you're just there, we'll walk you over. So they walked me over, and then they kind of disappeared. And I spent some time there, and then as I was going to go, I saw them sitting on a bench quite far away, very respectful, just kind of waiting for me to be done. So I went over to thank them, and they said, we'd like to tell you a story. One of the women, her parents, took one of the siblings, a different one every year, on a worldly vacation, worldwide vacation, and that person would take their spouse and go with them. But when they came around to the year that they were asking this young woman, they wouldn't let her bring her spouse because they were a lesbian couple and they didn't want to have anything to do with that relationship and won't support it or honor it. So the girl didn't go. She and her girlfriend decided that she would just pass on these trips with the parents. So at one point, it sort of circled back around where it was her turn, and she decided to play a song for her parents. And the song was called Simply Love. It's a song that I wrote. And they said, it's so bizarre that we're sitting here talking to you in Paris, but we finally got invited because our parents finally got what it was we were trying to say to them about our love through this song. And so we were both invited this year by the parents to come to Paris. So I invited them out to dinner, and we had a nice evening with one another. And it just made me, it was a thrilling story, and I was so glad that their parents were able to make that shift. There was another couple I was talking to who said, you know, how long do we have to wait for our parents to come around on this and to treat us as a legitimate couple? And I said, well, how long has it been since you told them? And they said, about 7 years. And I said, so you haven't told them about your relationship until now? How long have you been together? And they've been together about the same amount of time. And I said, well, I think maybe you need to give your parents the same 7 years. You know, that they didn't jump into this relationship without any fear, without any consternation. And it's too bad sometimes it takes us so long to change our minds and so taught. Isn't that a wonderful song from South Pacific? You've got to become right? And there's other people who think you get things really quickly, but I felt really proud of this young woman that they had kept pursuing, but they hadn't given up on their folks. So this is the song that they played. yeah? She writes me every once in a while. She lives somewhere on the East Coast, I think up near maybe Delaware or Rhode Island or whatever. And she says, I'm here with my cat. And that's her closest and strongest relationship. She's also got this relationship with her music. And if you haven't heard it, what a lyricist she is. She wrote this, was to music, but I like to say it as a piece of spoken word. Maybe it's the movies, or maybe it's the books, maybe it's the bullets, or maybe it's the real crooks, maybe it's the drugs, or maybe it's the parents, maybe it's the colors that everybody's wearing. Maybe it's the president, or maybe it's the last one, or maybe it's the one before that, what he'd done. Maybe it's the high schools, or maybe it's the teachers, or maybe it's those tattooed children in the bleachers. Maybe it's the Bible, maybe it's the lack, maybe it's the music, or maybe it's the crack. Maybe it's hairdos, maybe it's TV, maybe it's the cigarettes, maybe it's the family. Maybe it's the fast food, maybe it's the news, maybe it's divorce, or maybe it's abuse. Maybe it's the lawyers, maybe it's the prisons, maybe it's the senators, or maybe it's the system. Maybe it's the fathers, or maybe it's the sons. Maybe it's the sisters, or maybe it's the moms. Maybe it's the radio, maybe it's the road rage, maybe El Nino, or you being raised. Maybe it's the army, maybe it's the liquor. Maybe it's the papers, maybe the militia. Maybe it's the athletes, or maybe it's the ads. Maybe it's the sport fan, maybe it's a fad. Maybe it's the magazines, maybe it's the internet. Maybe it's the lottery, maybe it's the immigrants. Maybe it's taxes, big business. Maybe it's the KKK and the skinheads. Maybe it's the communists, maybe it's the Catholics, maybe it's the hippies, maybe it's the addicts. Maybe it's the art, maybe it's the sex. Maybe it's the homeless, or maybe it's the banks, maybe it's the clear cut, maybe it's the ozone, maybe it's the chemicals, maybe it's the car phone, maybe it's the fertilizer, maybe it's the nose ring, maybe it's the end, but I know one thing. If it were up to me, I'd take away the guns. Oh, how great that people have creativity and really share it with us. Maggie and her family have been such gracious hosts, as I was saying. We learned when we met her son, Matt, that he's a musician and teaches music. And they were up visiting from Louisville, Kentucky. So come back up. We can't have a trombonist sitting in the house around and not over. And I have to admit that I don't think in my 55 or 60 years of performing that I've ever invited a trombonist up to do a trio. So I'm honored too. This was great. Wonderful when you're 77, you can still have first-time experiences. Do you remember fluff off? But in fact, they brought huge amount of attention to what was going on in Wall Street, and nothing ever gets solved forever. But we took it down a little bit at a time, and a lot of us learned more about money as it goes on. So a few months later, and the producer said to us that there was a game about from and so I said to the audience to show that it was great they were doing this, and I was learning a lot, and I was not there saying intermission. The producer said they just learned that the police, local police, had gotten orders from higher up. I don't know where that was, but higher up, that they found the family. And so I said, this is the honest, you feel like you have to walk just observe to watch what they propose to do up there. I found out I had a clue on it all my self, and that thing the producer said, the police at this day or it was cold, it was dark, that they were going to shut it, surely people get hurt, be afraid, fear to confrontation, and that feel but they said 11 o'clock, which was the time where we shut down, all the people showed up. They just said that they did not do this action. So it was fun to know that with ever since. She has no idea who's listening. She has no idea who's paying attention. And so I try to remember that we just don't know who's watching. We don't know whose life is being altered, even in small bits, by just showing up and having conversations and living our particular social belief systems out loud so that they can be seeing this. In New York City, I saw this couple walking across the street, and they were frustrated about the heat and humidity, and they had a 3 or 4-year-old who just wasn't walking fast enough. Well, there's only so fast a little 3-year-old, 4-year-olds can walk. And one of them reached down and swatted the kid. And I just remember going through my head saying, Polly, say something, do something. You know how to do intervention. Don't let this go. Let this child know that inappropriate behavior is taking place. You know, you can't follow them home, but do something that will stick in that child's brain. And I just froze up. I froze up. And right across the street, there was a tall man in a bright colored shirt, and he just started dancing. And don't hit the baby, don't hit the baby. That's what I meant to say. You know, it was such pure, beautiful noticing and being active. That whole concept of noticing something and then letting it influence us. Like I'm driving along, I'll see a tennis court, and there'll be black people playing tennis, and I could just ignore it, or I could say, that wouldn't have happened without a civil rights movement. And it connects me up to other people who've lived on this planet who actually died for that to be okay. It's a different way of living. I don't think it's for everyone, but I have found it to be so enlightening and exciting and sometimes hurtful, sometimes challenging. Sometimes I feel like I'm brought to my knees and humbled. Sometimes I make huge mistakes, but I wouldn't trade it for the world, because I look back and every once in a while I'll be watching the Grammys or the Oscars, and there's a little part of me who was headed. I worked in film and television, and I did hair on Broadway, and I was in a couple films that were really good and some TV stuff, and I could have gone that way. I'd been given the sign that I was good enough, I was going to be okay, but I got drawn to this other thing, and so I'm watching the awards, and every once in a while I just have this feeling where I go, oh, I could have, should have, would have. No, I could have accepted a Grammy. But that happens maybe once a year. And the rest of the time I wouldn't give up this other life for the world. Because it's so rich. And people say, how have you been doing this for 55 years or whatever? And I think, well, I'm hanging out with some of the most wonderful people in the world. Wherever you go, you can find big-hearted, conscious people. And I don't really like hanging out with fascists, so this has worked out for me. And it just requires some getting used to, I think. I don't think it's easy to spend one's life in social activism and consciousness and active noticing. But there's a great reward. So, what was that? I digress, or maybe what's the opposite of digress? It's going backwards and not forward. But Albany, New York, it was just great that the police took notice that the orders were inappropriate. That's where I wanted to come around to. That they took responsibility, even though they could have gotten in trouble, and they knew that they should not follow suit at 11 o'clock at night when it was cold, dark, and when there were all those other people there. So. If there is a God, then God before I got cast in the movie. So I never went back to school and got that education, but the world sure gave me one anyway, you know. And it was, I was having lunch with a friend and saying, I just wish I could do more things, because those sitcoms were some of the best, because they were probably had the most conscientious stories of all the sitcoms. And I wish I could do more of that. And my friend said, well, I hear you're auditioning for a show. It's called FTA, and it's taken from the military that has FTA as one of their posters to try to get people to enlist. And it stands for Fun, Travel, and Adventure, Join the Army. So that's where they took the name FTA from that and turned it into a title of a show called Free the Army. And it was headed up by Jane Fonda and Donald Sutherland and Lynn Chandler and a lot of different artists who wanted to somehow figure out how to use their influence to cut the money off and to raise consciousness about if there were any conflicts that we had in Vietnam that could be worked out at the negotiation table. And didn't have to have thousands of people, not only from the United States, but from Canada, from Australia, from countries in like the Philippines, were part of this industry that was built in order to carry on this war. And I also heard, interestingly enough, that one of the biggest migrations at the time were women to Canada with their young sons before they were of the age to have to, not the word isn't register, is it? Well, draft, but don't you have to sign up or something like that?
Register for the draft.
Register for the draft. They didn't take girls then, so. This is part of the stroke brain. I just completely lost track of my FTA. So I went to the audition, and they were really busy. They said, Jane's busy, she'll see you soon, but you want to help collate. Remember collating? So, so for about an hour I collated forms and stuff, and they talked a little about what the trip was going to be. It was going to be a troop of 4 men, 4 women, 4 white people, 4 people of color, and then a film crew. And we would go to Hawaii, Okinawa, the Philippines, Japan, and places where men were predominantly would go for R&R when they would have time off from Vietnam. Now apparently the soldiers were already organizing, this wasn't made up by people on the state side, there were already GI coffee houses all over the place. There were men who had been to Vietnam would come and counsel men who were being called up. There were support groups in all these different countries because there was trouble happening. Like let's say the soldiers who'd been in Vietnam, they were exhausted, they had really a lot of battle trauma, and their superiors would say, we're going to send you to Hawaii, you'll have a little vacation, there'll be a lot of beautiful women on the beach, you can have a great time. So they would arrive in Hawaii and think that the beautiful women were waiting for them. The beautiful women didn't think that, and the brothers and the fathers of the beautiful women didn't think that, so there was ending up being battles between local people and soldiers on the beaches. Down in the Philippines, each place that we went, like in Okinawa, there was a lot of bomb testing that went on there where they would drop fake bombs to give pilots training that they needed in order to do this. But the sound was so bad that a huge part of the children's population were wearing hearing aids, and their hearing had been destroyed by the bombing practice. And we saw kids running around all over the town, like, you know, places we went, Okinawa with hearing aids, and some of them were playing with them, like, you know, they were toys, but we put them on as necessary. And everywhere we went, there was something like that going on. There were soldiers we talked to, like in Japan, that said part of the negotiation after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki was that there would never be nuclear weapons in Japan, and that was part of the negotiation. I'm not sure why, because the bombs were dropped by us, not by them, but that was the negotiation that they would have never had. And the soldiers said, they have them, we've seen them, we've loaded them. The U.S. has bases in Japan, and we've loaded nuclear weapons. So I was 20 years old. It was jaw-dropping to me to keep hearing these stories that I hadn't heard in school, that would help me to try to understand this country that I lived in, which had so much good going for it, and yet again and again running into pretty gruesome foreign policy. So Jane finally called me into her room, and she had seen other people and called me in, and she said, can you act? I gave me a little script to read, and I passed that on. And she said, can you do these dance steps? And I was a good dancer, so I did the dance steps. She said, great, can you sing? And yeah, I can. Like, oh, roll your boat ashore. She said, oh my God. And she said, can you have your passport and your suitcase ready in 3 days? We're going to New York to do a fundraiser with me and Mr. Mama. And we did that at the Philharmonic Hall. So that was really a beginning of my life. Because I thought I'd go for 3 or 4 weeks. I said to my father, we were going to the Philippines, I said, I'm a little worried, there's martial law there, I guess I could get killed. And he said, well, you could get hit by a garbage truck on a Sunday morning, in Los Angeles, and you might as well not make decisions about your life based on whether you're going to get killed or not, which I thought was a rather unique father's position to have when I was going. But he was right. He was absolutely right. It was worth everything to go into war zones, which later I did again in El Salvador, and went down to Chile, went to places, but what an extraordinary world if we're willing to meet it face on and to take those risks. So the FTA tour was filmed. It was on Netflix for a while. I don't know if it's been taken off, but you can go online and look it up. It's available. It's quite an extraordinary film. And there was a secondary film, it's kind of a good companion film called Sir, No Sir, which is more about the actual soldiers resisting to go to war. And there was this thing called fragging, when the soldiers that were right up against the enemy in Vietnam, and they were told they were going to go in and go to battle in the morning, and they would say to the commanding officer, no, we're not doing this anymore. We're not going to go in and kill a lot of Vietnamese women and children, and we're done. And they said, well, we'll write you up for insubordination. And they would say, well, if your tent doesn't blow up at night. And that was what they were living with day after day. The commanding officers couldn't move, the soldiers didn't want them to, and they all just sat. And certainly Nixon didn't want people to know it, so when our film was played in New York City, it played once, it was gone, it was physically taken, and it was never allowed to be played for dozens of years to finally resurface the war. Because, you don't want people to know about that stuff. So I was lucky to get to learn a lot in my young years that ended up affecting the rest of my life. And when I couldn't sing the songs I wanted to sing in Hollywood to the record companies, and they said there wasn't enough element of submission in my voice to be a pop star, I thought, okay, that was the final straw. I'm done here. And I started my own record company in 1972. And so working independently has been hard. Sometimes my ego, like I said, goes, oh, I wish but in the long run, I couldn't have asked for a more extraordinary life than to dive in to these communities around the world and to learn about the real human animal, not just the one that we see in sitcoms. So, yeah. I recommend it. Okay, so again, thank you, Mickey. Really wonderful that you decided to do this. Our tour was going to start up in the next place we're going, but Mickey said, come here first, and so it's just been great. We're going up to Altamont, New York, then driving across into Ann Arbor, up to Madison, and stuff in the west, and to Northern California, up to Seattle, and down to Southern California. And we're back on the road, and it's just different than it was before I got sick. And I'm learning how to do it, and Jen has been so supportive. It is great. I love traveling with you. We'll do 2 more here. Well, thanks to our sound people and technical back there. about was that when, for example, fisher people have to go out into the seas, and the seas may be reckless and it's dangerous, but they have to go fish because the people need to eat. So the community will go down to the shore to see them off, and they have a phrase that they say to their gods and goddesses, spiritual advisors, which is, come by here, bring a little bit of extra of your God juice here to protect our sailors and our fishing people. And someone who was visiting there heard them say in prayer, come by here, but with their accents didn't understand it because it sounded like kumbaya. And that's where that song kind of originated. Kumbaya, kumbaya. So it's often sung kind of as a campfire song, but I like to sing it as a prayer, and you're welcome to join. Kumbaya, kumbaya, kumbaya. Someone singing, Lord, kumbaya. Someone singing, Lord, kumbaya. Someone singing, Lord, kumbaya. Oh, that's a pretty prayer. I was driving from Nantucket, California, down to San Francisco because we had just learned that Harvey Milk and Mary Stoney had been assassinated. And I was meant to sing, and I thought, what do you sing when something like that happens? And I didn't think there was anything in my repertoire, but I remember saying to my friend who was driving the car with me, right now we're really out there working for our lives. This is a life and death thing now. This has become dangerous. Of course, it always had been, but events like this remind us. We are gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our lives. We are gentle, angry people, and we are singing for our because we're getting confused that Israel and Netanyahu are the same. That the criticism in my country, I have always criticized our leaders, and it doesn't mean I'm anti-American. It means that I am standing up for a country that is trying to do this experiment in democracy, and it is our job to criticize any leader who takes us down the wrong path. So as much as there are some people who feel like they're being attacked when one supports stopping the war against Gaza, that attack is against Jews or against Israel country, it's a misunderstanding. It's okay to be critical of a world leader who is committing genocide. And it's taken people a really hard time to have that conversation, but I think we must before every Palestinian